Welcome to episode 250, How to Prepare for a Hard Conversation.
Welcome to the Be That 1% podcast. I'm your host, James Silvis, mindset specialist and performance coach. And here on the show, I'm going to challenge you to think deeper, commit to greatness, and develop a stronger mindset. You'll hear stories from those who are living life on their terms, and you'll receive strategies that will help you level up. So the question is, are you ready to be your own 1%? Let's get started.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Be That 1% podcast. Thank you for being here. If this is your first time, welcome. And if this is your return visit, welcome home. I am excited to have you here today as we continue our discussion on hard conversations, right? This is something that no matter who you are as a human being, you're going to find yourself in these. Sometimes they find you. Other times you may have to initiate. And you know, it's very normal for us to want to avoid these. I know I've had that countless times. And your leadership and your impact depends on how many uncomfortable conversations you can have. There's a quote that I'm going to paraphrase that I heard from Tim Ferriss. I don't know if he's the originator of this, but basically it says something along the lines of your success is highly correlated to the amount of uncomfortable conversations you're willing to have. And when we talk about expressing our truth and being a leader and going first and living life on your terms, oftentimes that means going against the grain. It means talking about something that isn't maybe, let's say, normalized, right? And if you're a leader of a company, of a team, of an organization, you're going to have to share feedback about what's needed and also receive feedback from things that you may not know. So it kind of goes both ways. My attempt with this episode really is to help provide a framework for you to work through these hard conversations and prepare for uncertainty, right? I've had my fair share of hard conversations over the last 9 years in so many different diverse settings that this is where all this information has come from. It's been a lot of trial and error. It's been a lot of reflecting, a lot of asking what worked in this conversation. And, this is a part of what I've learned, right? So my hope is that it's simple, it's digestible, and it's easily executable so that you can go out there and utilize it today if need be, right? So I'll say that hard conversations or conversations in general, but being that this is the series of hard conversations, really the way I look at it is it's a dance. It's a dance. And we're in this dance together. And when two parties are communicating, that's what leads to a really healthy conversation. Even if both parties in that conversation don't agree, both parties are engaging. The moment one shuts down or withdraws, then that's where it takes a turn for not being an effective conversation, right? And we'll talk about that in the next episode, but I want to just say that the goal is to really create a space where both individuals feel enough safety to share what's on their mind, what's on their heart, right? Because that's really where we're truly going to understand somebody. So, the types of conversations that I've been thrown into in my career have ranged from drug addiction to being in the middle of a retreat and a marriage falling apart, and they weren't even involved in the retreat, that I had to step in and attend after a long day, 10-hour day, to really hold space and provide questions and clarity around what was happening and how to move forward. I've had people consult me on whether they wanted to stay or leave their marriage, how to fire someone, how to hire someone, how to take a leap from security into uncertainty. I mean, is just all around. Someone who originally or who has been diagnosed with cancer comes to me, and I'm not necessarily, I don't know how to relate because I'm not in these types of situations, but I hold the space and I allow what's coming through to come through. And I've done that so many times. And the feedback that I've received has been so favorable that I've continued to have repeat success. Success being able to help the individual work through challenging times, and also for me to deliver information in the form of feedback that isn't necessarily wanted or isn't even in the person's mind of something that I would say. And in an attempt to help them become a better person, a stronger leader, a more self aware individual, so that they can get out of their blind spots and start living more of their life on their terms, not on autopilot, not on default, not on belief systems that they created when they were 7 or 8 or 15 years old. Now that they're 30, 40, 50, 60, it's now time to live a much more intentional life, one that you're aware of that you're doing, right? Because we could all slide back into routine, but it's important as a leader and leading the way that you're trailblazing intentionally, not just off of a whim or always going by, just the seat of your pants. Right? So here, let's talk about what these conversations are really about. If you listen to the last episode, you'll remember that there's 3 conversations that we're having at all times, right? One about what happened, one about the feelings that we're experiencing over what happened, and the third was the identity that we feel is at stake or gets reinforced as a result of what happened. Most hard conversations are about feelings. They are about the stories that we create about what happened and how the emotions that come up because of that story. And so we first have to understand what is the story that we're telling ourselves so that we're aware of what someone else might be seeing to the best of our ability, and also understand that other people are going to be going through that sequence too. They're going to have probably a different perspective on what they saw, what they're feeling, and what is at stake for their identity. So we got to keep that in mind, because if we don't keep that in mind and we just go straight out balls to the wall, shooting at everything we can, that's not really going to help either. Right. So here is some prep work that I think we can all do. You could do. I know I've done this countless times on how to prepare yourself to, one, be clear, and two, be the space in which uncertainty is okay and exploration is encouraged, right? Because it's through the exploration that you understand more of yourself, and you also understand more of the other person's side. And if you understand more of their side, you know where they're coming from. You know how to craft your message. You know how to leave that conversation with a greater level of clarity and probably some action steps on what to do to either better that relationship, release that relationship, or next steps for what's called, depending on the context. So I kind of broke this down into 3 sections. We have the self-oriented questions. This is going to be the types of questions you ask yourself. Then there's going to be other-oriented questions that you're going to ask yourself about the other person. And then also solution-based questions to kind of gear that conversation towards some outcome, right? You're not completely married to it, but that's your intention. And that's the hope of having this conversation, is really to get to that place. And again, it may happen shorter amounts of time. It may happen longer periods of time. You may have to bob and weave and zig and zag to get there, but you have an idea of where you want it to go. All right. So the self-oriented questions are the following. First is, what is my intention for this conversation? What are my motives? What's my purpose for this? Right? Are you looking for clarity or closure? Or are you wanting to get more connected? Do you want to help find a solution to a problem? Is this to vent? What do you really want in this relationship or in this conversation, right? Having that subconsciously begins to help you select the words, the questions, the body language to facilitate that. Sometimes we go into a conversation really just wanting to vent, but we don't vocalize that. And so the other person is sitting there kind of wondering where this is going or what they need to do within this conversation. If we could bring that in because we've asked ourselves that question, it changes the whole dynamic of what that conversation is going to be like, right? This is so what's my intentions? The first question. This is kind of a sub part of the first question. What do you really want for yourself, for the other person, for the relationship? You, them, the relationship. And if you're the owner of a company, what do you want for the stakeholders or anyone else that's involved that you think is needed to be thought about before you have this conversation? Covering all those bases gives you as complete of a picture as you can have going into a conversation. You've taken the time to think about what you're going to say from many different angles. Most people don't do this. Sometimes because the conversation finds you and you just literally have no time to prep, so you're just kind of in it. Other times, it takes patience and reflection to be able to think about something outside of your own thought. And a leader that can do that is only diversifying their level of communication, making them more effective, and also coming off across as more empathetic and willing to understand, which automatically opens up the other person to share more information and even to receive more of what you have to say. Right. So that's kind of the first question, self-oriented. The second one is, how do I feel about what happened? Whatever happened, right? There's a story that's being created. That story could be factual to some extent. It could be completely off base, but there's a story that's happening. What are you feeling as a result of that? Are you angry, scared, hurt, defensive? It's important to know what you're feeling so that you can articulate that. Since hard conversations are mostly about feelings, and most people are scared to bring feelings into a conversation because they think emotions are only going to distort reality, which sometimes they do. If we don't develop our emotional awareness and our emotional intelligence, then we're denying a big part of who we are as humans. And if we don't have the courage to vocalize what we're feeling, how are we ever going to understand what someone else is feeling? We're not, which means we're going to guess. And people aren't very good guessers. And so that increases the disconnection again, right? And as leaders, we want to go first. So by us knowing what we're feeling and sharing that at some point in the conversation, ideally at the beginning, more so to the beginning, that opens up vulnerability for the other side to, one, hear and understand how we're seeing it and what we're feeling. And then as a byproduct, increasing the odds of them doing the same and reciprocating that behavior. The third question is, what could the other person say or do that could trigger me? Know thyself, Socrates famously said, right? And this is at the backbone. This is at the core of every personal development book, is to know yourself. What triggers you? What causes you to become defensive, to withdraw? You want to know that. Because when you're talking about something that is emotionally charged, that is hard for you to do, the chances that your brain's going to go into defense mode is very, very high. So thinking about that in advance of where I could potentially move away from what I know I need to move towards, I got to be aware of that. So if this person says something that I know if they say is going to trigger me, if I think about that beforehand, when that actually happens, if it happens in that conversation, I'm much more prepared, bringing in more awareness around it. I could take a deep breath. I could pause. I can ask for a second to gather myself. There are strategies that can be put in place. But if you don't think about that and you're just going into that conversation, hoping that it doesn't come up, and then it does, boom, explosion, right? And there may be an explosion automatically, but you're going to be more aware that there might be one, which helps with the preparation. The next question is, what do I think is at stake by having this conversation? Am I afraid that by speaking my truth and sharing my perspective that this person's going to leave this relationship, that they're going to quit, that they're going to tell other people something bad about me? I got to know that, right? Because one, that's mostly tied to fear, and if we can identify that, we can work through those fears and have more confidence and conviction when delivering our side when we actually are in that conversation. But we do want to know what's at stake, because we could take action to mitigate what we're afraid of before we even have that conversation, which helps us that conversation go much more smoothly, or at least prepare for a worst case scenario and surrender because we can't control anything outside of ourselves, and have that level of acceptance walking into that conversation, which takes a little bit of that emotional charge off. Not all of it, but some of it. Number 5 is, what responsibility do I have here? We'd like to think that it's all the other person's fault. Well, they shouldn't have done this. And in almost every case, we have something to do with some level of involvement in what's going on. Now, we're mostly talking about professional situations and even some, like, intimate personal relationships. There are moments where it's completely on the other end, but those are not very those are more on the rare side, right? We're talking about more common everyday problems where your level of involvement might be that you prolonged this conversation, sharing your truth. It might be that you assumed the worst and therefore acted based on that assumption. It might be that you've been unresponsive or blocked or not open to talking about this, or even projecting that level of openness to other people so that they can approach you to give you feedback, right? That may be your level of involvement. Or it straight up might be that you made a mistake and you got to own that. If you want someone else to own it, you got to own it too. And so, again, going back to leadership, which a lot of this podcast is about, leading life on your terms, we want to go first. Here's my level of involvement. I apologize for X, Y, and Z. After reflecting, I noticed that there are several times where I have I have unintentionally avoided this conversation. And now, after reflecting, I realized that I was doing that because I was afraid of blank, 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 and I was feeling blank, blank, blank. And I want this conversation to be an opportunity for us to gain deeper understanding, to find a deeper level of connection, and to find a way to move forward that supports both of us and this relationship. That might be an example of what you say, but you can't say something like that if you aren't aware of what's going on inside and then have the courage to vocalize that to the other person. And, relationships will test you daily. If you're, if you have the right people in your corner, there, even though you're challenged and it's uncomfortable, it'll be met with that same level of like, man, this is hard, but we're going to do this. Right. So that's what we're also searching for in an attempt to share more of our truth, is one, to share that with other people, but also to send out a beacon, a signal to say, here's what we want. Here's how we see things. I'm open to changing. And also I want to invite more conversations around this so that, I can grow as a person, as a leader, as a parent, as a husband, as a wife, you name it. Right. So by us speaking our truth, we're actually welcoming more of those conversations into our world, which may sound like, well, damn, now I got to challenge myself all the time. Yes. But the more you do these conversations, the more equipped you become to express what's going on and also to receive what someone else has to say. Your communication enhances. So your capacity to hold tension increases. And your endurance for having these types of conversations also increases. And on the flip side, by not doing these things, you burn out very quickly. I mean, you get into the conversation, you realize where it's headed, and then you bounce, you withdraw, you shut down, you just agree just to get out of there. And that's not supporting you and the other person and whatever relationship you're in with that person. Okay. Second section is the other oriented questions, right? And before I go on, what I'll also say is that these aren't like silver bullet strategies, right? These aren't things that work every single time. I don't know if there's off the top of my head, I don't know if there's a thing that is works every single time. There's a mixture of things that work depending on the context and the situation and what you have. And that's the benefit of having many different tools and many different frameworks, is that you can plug and play as needed, right? And so the point of bringing all of these questions up for you is that on average, these have been super effective. And although where these questions may not have been addressed in that conversation, the prep has allowed for deeper levels of conversation to happen because of the deeper levels of awareness I've had through the prep work that I've done and that my clients have done and that I've facilitated for my clients with my clients in real life conversation. And so, again, just want to put that as a caveat, right? I don't know if there's anything that's 100% foolproof. Okay, number two, other oriented questions. What are the goals, needs, and values of the individual? Now, when I work with leaders of international companies, big Fortune 500 companies, or just an everyday average manager of a company of 50 to 300 employees, and I say, how well do you know your people? And they always like search for a minute. Why? I think I know them pretty well. How many do you have on your team? They might say, 20, 25. Okay. What are their goals? What are their needs? What are their values? And I always get like this, I I need to have these kind of conversations. Yeah, you do. Because until you know that clearly, the conversation is going to go longer than it needs to be. The more you understand what drives people and what's important to them, the more you can craft your message to have it land in the most effective way. Does this mean it'll work every single time? No. But again, it increases the odds. If I know that one of your values is growth, I'm going to frame this conversation as growth, because by framing it as growth, you're going to see the value in it just by what you value. There's a higher probability of you leaning into that discomfort because you know growth is on the other side. If one of your values is certainty, then I want to make clear what is certain before we go into that conversation, right? What's certain is that I care for you and I love that you're a part of this team. What's uncertain right now is the behavior and the metrics that we're using to get ourselves to accomplish the goal, right? Depending on what you know about the other person, gives you the flexibility to craft your message according to how someone needs to hear it. This, it sounds so simple, and it is, but it takes time to build. You have to have conversations with your people. You have to document that. If you ever have the chance of working with me, I always have documents of all of my clients. Some have 50, 60 pages of notes from all of our conversations, what I've gathered, what I'm thinking, questions I want to ask, exercises I want to lead them through, and that helps me reference back what we've talked about so I can bring what we talked about last time potentially into this future conversation. So, what are you documenting all this information in? That's going to be really helpful. And also how often, how regular are you connecting with whoever it is that you're having a conversation with? Because that's gonna help you craft a message. Number two is, what past successes and failures has this person experienced, or what challenges have they faced? By knowing this, you could leverage this at the right times, right? So let's say you're giving feedback to an employee or a colleague or someone professionally, and you notice that the feedback that you're giving is the other person's trying to receive it, but they're also getting down on themselves. Like, oh gosh, I can't believe I did that, man. And like you could see the negative self-talk that's coming in. This is where you could pull in a past win or a past challenge that they've gotten through. So you sense that they're down. You might say, "Hey, you remember that time where you were working on the so and so project? Remember how hard that was? Oh yeah, gosh, that project. Yeah, you were struggling with that one, right? It was I think you spent, X amount of hours, you were blah blah blah, but you know what? At the end, you succeeded. And what that told me is that you have the resilience and you have the strength to get through hard things. And you want to know what? This conversation is yet another hard thing. And so let's remember that you're battle tested. Let's remember that you've done hard things and that you're going to continue to do hard things and that you're strong enough to handle it. I believe in you. And hopefully, by reminding you that you have already done this countless times, you'll begin to reignite that belief in yourself as well. So here's what we're going to do moving forward, right? And then segue in. But you you can't have those types of things if you don't know those types of stories or you don't have that data to pull on. Um, in whatever moment you may need it. So this is like depositing little potential I don't even want potential tools that you could deploy or potential opportunities that you can create inside of a conversation when you sense that it's heading in a direction that maybe isn't supportive for the relationship at whole. Number 3 is, what personality type and communication style does the other person have? Are they direct? Are they visual? Are they quiet and reflective? Are they introverted? Are they extroverted? This is going to depend. This is going to help you, again, formulate and structure what it is that you're saying. If someone is systems oriented or someone is like very in the weeds in a lot of things, they don't see big picture or they haven't trained themselves to, you're going to want to get into the weeds with them. You're going to want to say, okay, here's step 1. We're going to do this, this, and then here's step 2. Da, 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 da. Step 3, system thinking. If someone's an extroverted and they're excited by, big picture, where's the company headed, or where's this relationship going, or, what's the next thing that they can move into. This is what you're going to want to leverage in that kind of conversation. Oh, well, here's where the company's headed. Da, 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 da. And that means that what you're currently doing needs to be tweaked. We're not where we need to be in order to support that vision. So this conversation is going to be centered around, what we need to do moving forward, right? That could be an example of where you can pull in someone's communication style to land a message in a favorable way. Again, they may still take it defensive, but again, we're trying to do our best to increase the odds of them receiving what it is that we have to say. Also, so that concludes the other oriented section. Any of these questions that you're asking yourself and that you're prepping for, this is helping you articulate where you're coming from. And then on the flip side, listening on your end is going to be extremely helpful. So these also might be questions that you ask them in this conversation. Because you've already spent the time asking yourself these questions, you know where you kind of struggled, you know what maybe roadblocks you hit while trying to answer these questions. Understand that other person that you're communicating to might be going through a similar journey. And because you've done it, because you put the work in, you can now facilitate their greater levels of depth just through your understanding of what you did to prepare for the conversation. Right? So just wanted to note that there. Okay. Situation-based questions, right? Or a solution-based questions. This one's not too long. Just keep it short and sweet. What's the problem? Why is it a problem? I'm not going to complicate it. How is this a problem? How is it affecting you, your team, the business, the relationship? Get clear on that. What are some specific examples? Examples. We need examples. I can't tell you how many times I've heard and witnessed and heard third party of feedback being given or truth being expressed without examples. You never support me. Never? I highly doubt never maybe regularly, but one, if I care about this individual and I hear that feedback, I want to now know, how can I support you, and what are you interpreting as me not supporting you? Because I think that I'm supporting you, but clearly it's not being received. So I need help in understanding how you're seeing things in order to change in a favorable direction if I want to change. This is where examples come in, not just one, but at least two, ideally three if need be. Having three gives you the flexibility to drop those in different parts of the conversation. Two gives you to drop those back to back, right? So I noticed that the other day when you came home and you yelled at me, or when you came home and you interacted with the kids this way, or when you were in this meeting and you didn't speak up, or you did speak up, but the way you said this, I interpreted it that to be this. I created a story about what that meant, and here's how it made me feel, right? That's going to be really, really important. What are the examples? This helps you build your case. This helps open them to the challenge that's happening, and to hear your point of view. And it also helps you feel more confident coming in, knowing that your perspective is rooted in some sort of evidence, right? Now, when you're bringing this in to share these examples, and you're doing it in a confident way because you've taken the time to prep, also leave space for curiosity, to be curious that although that may be your perspective, there may be information that you don't know that the other person can say that can change your mind on how you feel about what you feel. Remain open to that, because if you're not, it's going to feel one-sided, and that one-sidedness of I'm right, you're wrong, you need to change, without me listening to why you didn't change or what you see or hear or view about what I said, that's going to make the person feel like they don't have options. And when people feel like they don't have options, they feel like they're being quote unquote controlled, or there's a dictator in the relationship, right? Even though you may be 100% right. People often change when they feel like it's okay not to. So you want to inspire them to change. You want to make your case, invite the perspective of them into this, so that there's engagement. And when there's engagement, there's more levels of openness and transparency and flow, which is helpful for all receiving of information. And if they they share their case and you still feel the same way, phenomenal. But at least remain open to potentially changing your mind, even if it's 10%, because oftentimes they will say something that causes you to see it in a different way. And context is important here, right? There's moments where it's like, this is wrong, can't have this, it's a company thing, done, like, got to deliver it, cool. More so in the personal space, we don't know what people are going through, right? We don't know what just happened, what they're bringing into the business. We don't know what past they've had if it's a new relationship. We don't know what happened earlier in the day that could be affecting their mood or their temperament, or change their behavior or cause them to do something that was out of character. So we want to remain open enough to hear what that could potentially be, and then make our decision from there. All right. So hopefully these questions, if you haven't already utilized these in some way, can be something that you can leverage in prep for any sort of hard conversation that you have, both personally and professionally. And then I'll leave you kind of with these three little things to think about. One is, as you're preparing for this, recognize that the other person may not have had as much time or any time to talk about this, think about this, what happened between you and that other person. So we want to activate some patience in that conversation, because they may be working through that for the first time in real time, which can be challenging. Number two is create space for them to talk. You prepping for this is not just so you can go in there and in 10 minutes word vomit, get everything out, even though it's great that you're giving out very in a very articulate way, and then say, okay, we're done here because I'm uncomfortable and now I want to get out. Now that I expressed this and I don't know what the outcome is going to be. I don't know what the consequence is going to be. I want to get out. I've done it. Thank you. Bye. Like, that's not going to be supportive either. So when you share, you want to create space for them to share as well. That could be after each question. That could be whenever you feel it. Oftentimes, if you feel like you're talking a lot, which we can tend to do if we're uncomfortable, we want to fill space. We want to just get through it. We can not be mindful of how long we're talking, which to the other person, they may have been wanting to say something 2-3 minutes ago when you said something, and now they're not listening to anything you're saying because they're thinking about that one thing that you said, right? So pausing regularly and saying, let me stop there, and I want to invite your perspective on this. That allows them to address anything that they may have a conflict with, and also for you to see if that part of what you just said was received, right? So be mindful of that. And then lastly, assume positive intent. Assume positive intent. There are people out there that do things maliciously. No denying that. And what I have found in most cases is that people don't understand the full picture before they react. And so assuming positive intent before a hard conversation helps you enter that conversation without being defensive or hard-headed or closed off, and instead more open to sharing what you have to say and also receiving what the other person has to say. So don't seek to control in the conversation. Just express and receive, and watch how that conversation goes. My guess is that you'll reach a new level of communication, and it'll be really helpful, and you'll find out more than you thought you would. And there's a chance that at the end of the conversation, nothing changes, but at least you did your part, and now it was revealed that this is something that isn't in alignment anymore. And that person either needs to move on to another department, if it's a company thing, be released from the company because they're not performing and there's no sense of commitment there and no willingness to want to change. Or it might be a personal relationship where, it's not ready to enter that next level, or it's not ready to be, and there's nothing that is going to help it continue either. There's many different scenarios that what can happen, but our job is to do our part, and that is to prepare and to surrender to our control of what we think should happen, and instead listen and allow our values and our beliefs and our vision of where we want to go to kind of direct the flow of that conversation. So hopefully this was helpful. If you found value in this, please share this with your friends, post this, share this, help me get this message out to as many people. My goal is to really help people live life on their terms and to be one of one, right? Because that's what you are. So thank you for being here. Thank you for tuning in. And feel free to send any DMs, emails on content that you want to hear more of. All right. Much love. Thank you so much. Go out there, be your own 1%. And I'll see you on the next one.